Hi everyone, I'm breaking out in front of this video. It's the next day because I reached out to the company that manufactures the tool I'm using in this video, and they agreed to do a giveaway on my channel. So ProPlugger can ship to the 48 states, so if you're in those 48 states and you're interested in winning one, comment below of how you would use the tool. I hope y'all are staying warm, and I hope you win. You'll notice at the end of this video, I mentioned how nice the garden might look with a little dusting of snow. Little did I know that the next day we would be getting so much snow that would stick. So I'm going to take a few clips around the garden before we start today's video. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Southerners Northern Garden. So today I'm going to be doing my final planting in the garden. I have my Heuchera that came in, peachberry ice, that I ordered 3 months ago, and it is currently 37 degrees outside. This is the time of year where I do not want to be in the garden at all because it's so cold, and I am of course a Southern boy at heart, and it makes me wonder why 3 months ago I chose to have these Heuchera ordered and delivered during this time, and it was because this is the earliest availability they had. So I'm going to be planting some Purple Sensation Alliums, and then I'm going to be doing some lawn repair before fall concludes and winter sets in. So let me take you over to where I'm going to be planting the Heuchera. I've mentioned these several times throughout the season where I'm going to be putting these, but I want you to get a look at them and show you how I'm going to be accomplishing this task quickly today. So follow along. All right, everyone. So today I'm going to be accomplishing all of these tasks with the ProPlugger. I have shown this tool in my videos several times. I love it for repairing spots in the grass, but it has been an indispensable tool this year to plant small plugs of plants since I've been significantly expanding my garden. It's also a great bulb planter, so I'll be using it to plant my Purple Sensation Alliums, and it's great because it has different sizes, so it can go at different depths depending on if you exchange this ring right here. This ring will allow it to go a little deeper, or you can completely remove the rings, which is what I might be doing to plant the bulbs, because the bulbs do need to be planted 5 inches deep. This is about 3 inches, and the other ring allows about 4 inches, and then the full depth is 5 to 6 inches. So I've had this tool from ProPlugger for about 2 years, and before this time I mainly used it to repair spots in my grass. If you have a spreading grass like bluegrass in our transition zone or in the north, it works really well because bluegrass spreads by rhizomes and it will extend after you move a plug. If you have a non-spreading grass, you could also use it to create plugs to fill in areas, but just realize that grass isn't going to fill in. You may still have to spread a little seed. It has a relatively small hole in the bottom, maybe 2–2.5 inches, and that's the perfect size for plugs of plants and also to plug grass. If you need to plant something a little larger, you can kind of put multiple holes together, but I just love it because it's super quick and super easy to do and allows me to get jobs done really quickly without tilling up my really heavy clay soil or digging in it with my auger. So when I'm looking for less of a mess, I choose this product because I really love it. So today I'm going to be planting Peachberry Ice Heuchera, which is this color Heuchera right here. This is a variety by Proven Winners that I picked up from Walter's Gardens around late August, early August, and it's a really interesting foliage color that I wanted to pair with my Serendipity Alliums that I planted in this bed earlier this season. So what I'm going to do is just make a hole, which is about the same size as the ProPlugger, and then I'll be just able to pop these plugs in there perfectly. The temperature is today pretty cold. Heuchera are semi-evergreen to evergreen in my area, so I'm hoping we won't have any problems with these surviving. I got to get them in the ground as soon as possible though, because the temperatures aren't getting any warmer. They warm up a little bit in the coming week. That's why I'm getting them in today, and tomorrow it's supposed to rain, so it'll have some nice water to settle them in for the winter season. So let's get started planting these. I will probably make all of my holes first because it's super quick to do with the ProPlugger, and then I will come through and just pop these Heuchera in there. There's a total of 20, so all I got to make is 20 holes. And let's see how it works. So as I mentioned, I have about 20 of these Heucheras, so I'm just going to roughly space out. I'm not going to do any significant measuring. along the line of these alliums, and just get 10 holes on this side and 10 on the other side of the path. I may end up with 9 and 11, just depending on how this path curves, but we're gonna space it out and kind of see where that starts. I may start at one end, do one, another at the end, and then kind of in the center and spread it out. I don't know. It's gonna just be pretty even spacing as much as I can get it. Now, I am going through mulch, and so the ProPlugger is gonna struggle a little bit going through the mulch. You'll see in a bit when I start to repair the lawn that it is kind of a sharp tool, and it will go very easily into just regular grass. Preferably, you would remove the mulch and just go directly into the flower bed. I'm being a little lazy today, honestly, but it will work perfectly fine, and it's a tool that's really easy for anyone to use. So let's get started. And this mulch has been here for a couple months, so it's actually pretty easy to do. And you can see it removes plugs really perfectly, and then at the end I'll show you what it looks like when they come out. So I have 9 holes here. I'm gonna go ahead and do the holes on this side and then see where I can put one, whether it be on the end of this or if I need 11 to go on this side. So when you're done with the ProPlugger, it just fills up with these plugs, and you can empty it into any bin. If you're doing grass, you don't have to do this, but you can see it just creates a perfect little plug of soil here that you can just throw in your garden. You can see how heavy clay my soil is specifically, and one of the reasons I'm adding good organic mulch to this. It's just really hard and doesn't crumble very easily. So these Heucheras aren't completely rooted into these plugs, so I'm gonna squeeze them a little bit to make them fit the size of this hole nicely, and just squish them in here and move the mulch around to accommodate them. Because Heuchera are such a hardy plant and do really well, specifically these varieties will adapt to sun or shade, which is one of the reasons I picked them out. A lot of Heucheras are partial shade plants, similar to hostas, but Proven Winners has developed a lot of really nice versions of Heuchera or Heucherella, which is a cross between Heuchera and 𝗣𝗟𝗓𝗏, which look very similar. Don't ask me the difference. I think it's mostly in leaf structure. All right, if that wasn't one of the quickest plantings I've done all season, I don't know what is. So I'm gonna get the other side started and do either 10 or 11 holes, and then I'll put an extra one on the end, which is probably what I will end up doing, but let's move the camera a little bit. May have hit a drip line here. This is a lot of the reason why I didn't plant or put down drip line in this area to begin with. That may have to be fixed in spring. It doesn't look like I cut all the way through it, but when I turn the irrigation on in spring, if it starts spewing, I'll just cut it and piece it together. These will be spaced a little funny because I do have this dwarf mondo grass here. These will grow up. I am planting these really closely, but they will grow up and just kind of blend together, which is what I was wanting. So I'll have the Peachberry Ice Heuchera, Serendipity Alliums, and Peach Sky Yarrow directly behind that right here. And I think it'll be a beautiful mixture of the red, orangey leaves of the Heuchera, the purple blooms, and the peach blooms from the yarrow. Heucheras, if you don't know, you pick them up at the garden center, and they're usually really, really small. And I have planted mine in the past in the fall. And you don't think they're one of those perennials, as some perennials can take a while to grow pretty large. Well, when I picked up Heuchera last year and planted them in the front, around my front flower beds and fountain and along the sidewalk, by the spring, they had already put on and looked like full-grown plants. It was kind of insane how quickly they grow. And I've learned from ordering plants from Walter's Gardens in the past. I started and got all of the Red Rover Heuchera plugs. They transition to containers, larger containers, and put on a ton of root growth really quickly. So they're a plant that will get established in your garden really quickly, and they're also a plant that will do really well because they're really hardy and pretty much low maintenance. We'll see how well these do in full sun. These are supposed to be able to take full sun. As I mentioned, most Heuchera, or a lot of old varieties of Heuchera, are more shade tolerant. I will be adding drip here next year, but we'll just keep an eye on them, and if they don't like this place, I'll replace them with something else. All right, so the Heuchera are done. My last planting task before I get to lawn repair is planting some purple sensation alliums. So alliums I do not have good luck with in my garden as far as the bulb form. Millennium allium and serendipity allium are perennials and do really well in my garden. I don't know if it's because of my heavy clay soil that they just don't survive really well. Bulbs in general can have that issue. If you'll notice in my garden, I don't have a lot of bulbs planted. Part of the reason for that is I have not found a good bulb yet that does really well, and the second reason is bulbs are one of the last things you should plant in your garden after you're done planting other things. And as you know, I've undertaken planting a lot of other things this summer, and while I wanted to get more bulbs in and order some bulbs for this fall, I, one, didn't have the time, and two, am not sure where I would want to place those yet. So that may be a project for next year. It's something that I am really missing in my garden. I do have some bulbs out front. There are no bulbs in the backyard, so this will be the first start of those, and we'll see if they come up well in return the year after. But it's also something, because of our weather, that transitions really oddly into early spring. So the bulbs will come up, and then the perennials, we typically go from like cold to warm relatively quickly, and then the bulbs are like intermingled with all my other perennials, and then it looks really messy and the foliage stays for a really long time. So I need to find and do some research on some bulbs that will bloom early and also will kind of retreat early, and I can cut down the foliage so it doesn't look as messy to me, because I just don't love that look when the seasons kind of intermingle and you have the dead looking tulip or daffodil foliage, and then your perennials are also blooming, and they kind of interfere with each other because I planted so closely together. So how I'm going to be planting these alliums is I'm going to be removing that circular thing from the ProPlugger, and I'm going to plant these in groups. This is a pack of 30, so I'll probably do groups of 5, and I'm just going to space them around these roses in this area, so they will come up and the roses will start blooming later, and then they can be cut off and won't interfere with any of that. I'm going to remove that ring from the ProPlugger, which is relatively easy to do. You just pull it off and then scoot some mulch out of the way, and that way the ProPlugger can get down as far as it needs to, because these are supposed to be buried 5 inches. So this is a different type of allium. You have likely seen Gladiator or Globe Master. I have planted both of those in my garden and have not had good luck with those returning. These were like $15 at Costco. You know I love Costco bulbs and Costco plants and Costco tools for the gardener. And so this was an easy try in the garden. If it doesn't work or don't come back, not a whole lot of money lost, but hopefully they will at least bloom the first year and provide some early color in this area. So let's get started planting these bulbs. So I did have to take a little tool to knock off this ring, because this ring's never been changed since I've owned it for the past 3 years, but it came off relatively easy. So I'm just going to make 5 holes in each of these little circular areas that I made here. So all bulbs, as you're probably aware, have an end that needs to be pointed up for planting. These have, you can actually see the roots on the bottom of it. But typically bulbs have a little pointy end that just has a little point on them, and of course that goes facing the top. So you just drop those down in there. They're actually a perfect size for this ProPlugger. If you have really big bulbs, you may have to do 2 holes next to each other, but this is working really well. And cover with mulch and you're all done. So I'm going to get all of these finished, and then we'll be done with this project. Okay, so my tiny bulb planting project for the season is done. The last thing I want to do is repair some areas in the grass This would typically be done anytime throughout the season, honestly, because the ProPlugger allows you to go down to about any depth, up to 6 inches, depending on which ring you put on there, or no ring at all. You can go down to about any depth you need to. I typically use just the smallest ring, so I'm going to put back on the ring that I just took off to plant the bulbs, and I'm going to find a patch of my yard that I'm going to take plugs here and there from to put around the bottom of our steps. I have 2 Springer Spaniels that are puppies and a Dachshund that's older, and both and all of them like to come right at the bottom of the steps of our patio and relieve themselves all the time, so I am constantly struggling with the grass in that area. So as you may have noticed in my last video, I actually have it fenced off and blocked so the dogs will use another route, because this area in winter gets really muddy and it's difficult letting the dogs in and out and having to clean them up each time they have to go out. So what I've considered in that spot is putting a piece of rock like I have behind me on this path here, and I may do that next year. So what I'm thinking about in the garden for next year is I have bluegrass. I'm going to overseed it with a different variety of grass that I'm going to do a little research during winter that will come up quickly and will allow to fill in this grass easier. I love bluegrass, it is great. But in the backyard specifically, because it's a really high traffic area, the type of bluegrass I have anyway seems to not hold up as well. But there has been a lot of traffic in this area this fall, this summer, because we had the shed installed, the fence was installed, our windows were just installed, and I brought all this mulch back here, back and forth. And we had some wet weather, and so the grass just does not hold up to traffic very well in that wet weather. So I'm going to be moving a little bit of plugs of the bluegrass, because bluegrass does spread. Like I said, if you have a non-spreading grass, you can also do this, but the results may vary. And I'm going to take the grass from next to the shed here beside my blueberries, which I'll record briefly. That grass, as I've mentioned in a previous video, will probably end up being covered up with mulch anyway next year. And then I'll do a little stone path to the shed. Even though these are tiny holes, and if you have bluegrass or another grass, when you replug those with regular soil, they fill in really quickly with the bluegrass. So it's almost as if you can't see it. If your lawn is really growing during the summer, you'll never notice that you took plugs. But it's a great way to quickly fill in some areas of your grass. So I'm going to put the ring back on this and take a few plugs of bluegrass, and then take you over there to where the grass is doing not so well, and plug the grass and show you how easy that is. So because there's no mulch here and we've had a lot of rain, the grass is really wet, so you can see how easy this ProPlugger goes just into the grass right here. And I'm just going to take some grass plugs a few inches apart. All right, I'm going to go empty these plugs up near the patio and create the same amount of holes, and then I'll take you up there as I plug those. So as you can see, the dogs just do a number to this area. Even throughout the summer season when the grass is trying to grow really well. So I'm going to dump out all these plugs and then make equal number of plugs here, just so this can start to fill in next year. And that, my friends, was the last planting I have to do in my garden this season. I still need to remove some of my annuals, the petunias and the ferns from the front of my porch. That's a really easy job, won't take too long. I may do that today or tomorrow or next weekend. Our cold weather is finally really setting in, and so the garden is going to sleep. I intend to do a garden tour over the next couple weeks. It's going to be kind of like a winter garden tour, so you can see what my garden looks like when everything has settled in. Right now the hydrangeas have all browned out on the stems. There's a lot of winter interest in the garden, as you can see here from this limelight that's beside me. And I'm really excited about the evergreen interests I added to the garden this season, especially in the backyard. The backyard didn't have any evergreen interest before this season, and so I think as winter sets in and more of the perennials die back to the ground, this will look even more magical with a light dusting of snow. So if you don't have a ProPlugger, I highly recommend it for any gardener. As I've mentioned on my channel, I was really into grass before I became as much of an ornamental gardener as I am, and I purchased this ProPlugger solely for grass purposes 2 or 3 years ago. And since that time, especially this year, I have discovered that it is an invaluable tool in the gardener's toolbox to get things done quickly, effectively, and as efficiently as possible. And it's versatile enough with the different depths that you can plant a variety of bulbs, do plugs of plants like I just did there that you can find online. As you know, I did my mondo grass with some of these. I planted plugs of the 𝗣𝗜𝗗𝗘𝗢 that I have next to me right here that I got from an online source. Always check your local garden center first for plugs of plants, or ask your garden center if they carry plugs or can order plugs for you. I always encourage you to purchase from like Etsy for someone like you and I who are offering plugs of plants online, or a small garden center that has an Etsy channel that is putting themselves out there to sell plants online just to get that extra business. If you purchase plugs of plants from Amazon or Walmart like I have in the past, be sure that those plants are being sold by a small garden center, just to support that small garden center, especially during the winter season. A lot of my dwarf mondo grass, not this specifically, but the ones I have next to the house, were purchased in January from Amazon from a garden center, I think it was in Florida, that was putting themselves out there to sell to people online. And that's a great way to give your local garden centers money during the winter instead of purchasing from big box stores. As far as the ProPlugger can be found on Amazon. I will put a link below. It is a great tool, as I mentioned, and if you don't have one yourself, or if you have a gardening buddy, they're relatively inexpensive, so it'd be a great holiday gift for your garden friend. So as we wind down the gardening season, I will of course be posting fewer videos. I am considering taking about a month off and just thinking about things I'm going to do next year, working on editing my videos. I'm considering re-uploading my July garden tour since it was so popular, with the names of every plant in my garden that's shown on the video on the screen. I feel like that would be a really good idea. If you're interested in seeing that, let me know. I may do another garden tour that way as well, because the July garden tour, I was going back and looking at it, and just since July, none of this behind me was here. And so we still had the little flower bed, kind of, you know, little avocado bed is what I called it, around the willow. And so the backyard has completely transformed since July. So I will try and see if I have a later garden tour. I did a hydrangea garden tour in August, but I don't think I've had another garden tour. So my garden tour, my winter garden tour that I will be doing, I will probably also label those plants in that video as well. So it may take me a while to get it up, but I want y'all to see what these plants look like in winter and the winter interest they give. The kindred spirit oaks that I planted, I will show a picture on the screen, have turned a beautiful yellow. I did not have any yellow foliage going into fall in the garden, and I'm really happy with how those look. I believe the leaves will fall off of them. I don't believe it's an oak that will hold their leaves through winter, and if not, that's perfectly fine because the branch structure will still provide winter interest. But overall, I am ready to take a restful break from gardening and get recharged for next year, because I have lots of ideas for next year. I've got to get lots of things planted and planned on these arbors and trellises that I have. And next year I want to be a better vegetable gardener. I neglected the vegetable garden pretty significantly this year. I grew lots of food, and a lot of that food was wasted because I just didn't have time to process it like I have done in years past. And so I need to do a better job of being thankful and gracious of the things I grow, and eating that or processing it so I can freeze it or can it for winter months. So I hope you enjoyed this video and planting with me on this very cold fall/winter day. I hope you're cleaning up your garden and everything is getting settled in for winter. If you haven't yet, you might want to consider it. Our leaves on a lot of our trees have still not fallen off yet, but I'm going to take you and record the process of crunching those leaves up and putting them on my vegetable garden over winter to protect some of those plants that I healed in. But otherwise, thank you guys for joining me. And remember, in a world full of hate, be a light. Take care, everyone. Bye.